Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to a very exciting episode of CS News. Hope you guys all enjoy. As always, let's get right into it. And in big Brazilian CS news, for all of you guys who are Brazilian fans out there, our first story today involves Luminosity Gaming, who's officially released two of their players, both Knack and Bit, from their 5-man roster. Now, as many of you guys know, this entire roster was formerly the win-out lineup just a couple months ago, back in July, until they were signed by Luminosity Gaming. And in their span as a 5-man roster, just 4 months spent together as this 5-man team, or formerly this 5-man team, until they release these guys, they have really yet to come close to any success as their companion teams. Tempo Storm, SK Gaming, obviously seeing more success than these guys have, and kind of a letdown for the Brazilian scene. So it was really only a matter of time before they released some of their players. As many of you guys know, they also failed to actually qualify for ESL Pro League. They came down to that final match after being, by a majority of people, popular voted into that finals match versus Echo Fox for that last final spot. They lost out to Echo Fox there. I mean, you have a lot of North American teams, even Splice, Complexity, making the ESL Pro League. One of the top teams, the only top team really not there, is this win-out roster, this former win-out roster, and Luminosity Gaming. Of course, after giving away the SK Gaming roster, we expected a lot more out of these guys. A lot of people saying they were overhyped, and it has somewhat come true. So also in the news, guys, kind of unique to have people this time of season actually release two players. We can expect they probably have two more players somewhere in their barrel loaded up, ready to go. Hopefully sometime soon they'll be signing those guys, because it is mid-season for a lot of these tournaments coming up. So we can expect these guys to sign new players soon. But as of right now, Luminosity Gaming down to 3 players. And before we get into one of our 2 Starladder stories today, guys, I want to discuss first off, before the upsets, before all that, before all the group stage stuff, for Season 2 of Starladder Invitational League, they have indeed brought back, in the previous years, the same thing. They brought back some of the sick team animated gloves. If any of you had the chance to notice this yet, I actually failed to get many screenshots. Had someone send in some screenshots to me, so thank you very much. On screen will be teams like Heroic, Virtus Pro, and also Cloud9's gloves for the tournament. Starladder has done this in the past. I know they did it for sure back in 2015 with some of their tournaments, and it's one of the cooler things that tournaments actually provide for these teams on the servers, and I think it looks ridiculously cool for most of these teams, some of them a little lamer than others, but it can't help make me think, though, that sometime near in the future, Valve will take this idea and try and make money off it. But right now, guys, if you have not noticed, throughout Starladder Season 2 of this Starladder Invitational League, they brought back the gloves. They look absolutely sick. And once again, before we get into the quarterfinal teams, guys, in the group stages, the 8 teams who advanced out of group stages for Starladder Invitational League Season 2, that is, if you guys have not heard so far, we had 2 extreme upsets so far through the tournament. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about this so far. The first being Na'Vi, who of course was simple, were suspected to be not only one of the top teams here, one of the strongest teams at this Starladder tournament, but also one of the strongest teams in the world after acquiring Simple, especially when they went to go boot camp with SK Gaming, one of the strongest teams here. They were first surprised on day 1 by Tai Lu, losing 16-10 in these best-of-1 map plays. Again, a kind of crucial thing here, especially when you have teams like Na'Vi here at these tournaments, and also Virtus Pro we'll talk about later, where they have stronger map pools, but anything can happen in a best-of-1 series, all depending on map play. Tai Lu upset them on day 1, 16-10, and they also failed to amount to a comeback from Astralis on day 2, and lost in overtime 19-16 there, and were sent packing alongside another top 3 team, arguably definitely a top 5 team in the world, that is Virtus Pro, who arguably also suffered a more disappointing loss here. First off, on day 1, they lost to CyberZen, one of those teams in this tournament who was put off on everyone's radar. They're now competing today to be one of those 8 teams moving on. So kind of cool there. They lost, and not really in a close fashion whatsoever. Very dominating, 16-7 to CyberZen, and then again they lost to MBS on day 2 as well, 16-8, sending this oldest roster here at Starladder home alongside Na'Vi. 2 of the top 5 teams here have already been sent home with only $3,000 in their prize purse. So for the Starladder Season 2 Invitational, discussing the 8 quarterfinal teams who will move on out of group stages. First off, it was Cloud9, who was able to move out of groups 2-0, but kind of got lucky. Not gonna lie to all of you guys, they first off had to play CyberZen. A lot of you guys might say, yeah, well, CyberZen beat Virtus Pro, but when it comes down to map pool, really at it, Cloud9 had the advantage here. They beat CyberZen, they went also on to beat MBS as well, and they moved on after their first 2 matches. They'll be facing off in the quarterfinals against Flipside Tactics, team that by myself included was majorly, not really a team that was supposed to move on. I doubted them at first. They actually beat FaZe Clan today in a best of 3 to move on as well. Heroic is also one of those teams moving on who is somewhat unexpected, and they'll be moving forward after taking down both Astralis and Tai Lu in group play, and they'll be facing off against our youngest lineup here in the tournament. That's the Dignitas lineup, who again, probably one of the cooler stories here. If you guys don't remember day 1 of this tournament, they actually faced off against Godsent, that new Swedish roster there, arguably one of the best Swedish roster now in the world, and they actually lost to them 16-3, a devastating loss on day 1. They came back today this morning in a deciding factor, a deciding best of 3 matchup of who would move on, and it was Dignitas who beat the Swedish roster, arguably the best Swedish roster in the world, and in a best of 3 series, they actually swept them 2-0, so Dignitas will also move on, and the next 4 teams who are also in. And our next 4 teams are moving on to the quarterfinals will be NIP, who dominated group stages with Michael Lilly as their stand-in for Pith, versus Astralis, who managed to come back today on their 3rd and final map just moments ago at the point point of me making this video. On the third and final map against Tyloo, after losing 9 rounds of Tyloo on their CT side, Astralis came back to take 10 rounds on their own T side on Mirage. A pretty incredible thing there as Astralis move on. G2 will also be moving on with them as they showed no trouble throughout the group stages, and they'll be facing off against the winner of Envious and CyberZen. At the point of you guys watching this video, you guys will see the end of that match and who moved on. I'm actually going to root for CyberZen. I have to root for underdogs all the time, but I actually have class right now that I can't go to, that I have to go to, and I can't actually wait for those matches to go through. So those are your 7 of 8 teams so far. It's now up to Envious and CyberZen to fight out for that 8th final quarterfinal spot. And in very huge CSGO news, I'm sure a lot of you guys heard about this yesterday. We have the announcement of technically the second WESA. Many of you guys heard about the World Esports Association a long time ago, but apparently this new one, the PEA, also known as the Professional Esports Association, announced yesterday, claims to have many differences. So this can be my discussion about that, guys. If you want to skip past this, I think this can be my last story today, so I'm so sorry about that, but I really want to state my own opinions on what I see as the flaws or maybe the kind of controversial issues as of right now with this new organization or league or whatever they want to call it. So seemingly as of right now, you know, when we first did the WESA, the World Esports Association, when they were first announced, they came out and said, we're not exclusive, you know, we allow anybody, but no North American teams were actually claimed to be invited to this WESA. And now we have the PEA come out and they say, same thing, we're not exclusive, you know, we're open to anybody, but all of a sudden they only have North American teams. So kind of a conflict here is we have these WESA and we have the PEA, and all of a sudden it seems like we're splitting this game in half, or the competitive scene at least, with all these professional organizations, whether they're going to be in the WESA or the PEA, and what about all the teams outside of that? So I'll talk about this in coming weeks, guys, the problems with that I see so far, but to be exact, as of right now, I'll give you some details. Apparently the North American teams with ties as of right now to the Professional Esports Association or the PEA are TSM, Liquid, Cloud9, Immortals, Energy, and Complexity. I'm wondering right now where the heck Optic Gaming is. You know, they're one of the top orgs right now, especially as of late, with some of the better players there, with also some new confirmed rosters there as well. I'm really kind of conflicted where Optic Gaming would be in this. You would think they definitely want to take a piece in this if it was so good to be true. Now, also, apparently the goal of this organization is apparently to be dedicated to the future of the player and benefiting these players on a long-term standpoint. So as many of you guys know, a lot of these leagues and tournaments, they give you prize pool money, they toss it at you if you win, they don't toss it up if you don't win, and you're done, you're on your way, next tournament next weekend. Now apparently this league is going to offer long-term benefits to things like, you know, possibly investment plan, retirement planning. This is really all we have to go off right now. Again, I did not go into grave detail for all of you guys, but just like the WSA in their first article had a lot of broad wording, same here with the PEA when they have words like, they have statements like casters will receive equal pay as a player. I mean, does that mean a caster and players are given a salary, or is a caster going to be paid as much as a higher tier player or a lower tier player? Is a caster going to be paid more if they cast a game that's the grand finals compared to the group stages? It's very, very broad wording. If I were a caster right now, I'd say, does that mean I'm a professional player now? Am I only going to get paid if I win as a caster? And also other things as well. They have also stated that all players will have an authoritative voice in the organization. Now this again makes them somewhat unique. WSA kind of promised the same thing, but they already have their board of directors and their exec board decided. This one specifically says that players will have a voice in all rulings. Now this also brings up a key issue, is what can the players rule on? Can the players only come in and have their voice said on statements that are made for them, on conflicts that are actually given to them, or can they make their own conflicts or make their own problems and say, hey, let's talk about this? So again a big case here for players, because if players have a voice all of a sudden, can they bring in their own rulings and say, hey, I want to bring back all banned players, I want to bring back the XI by power guys? Can they rule on cases like this? What can they push to actually have their own voice be set on? And that's the one thing I'm worried about, is oftentimes when people say, oh, these people get a voice, it's only when they get a voice on subjects that a higher person will choose for them. So I'm very curious to see, guys. Also, a lastly big worry and a last note for all of you is I'm very worried as of right now, the North American scene kind of meshing with the South American scene, being split off completely by not only an ocean, but by these organizations from the Asian scene and also the European scene. And a really big point here, I believe, is it's Mr. Milanovic actually been tweeting out a lot about this and making some very key points, as to the point as we already have Asian teams and Chinese scene teams who are really struggling to participate and actually get into chances to qualify for these events. As many of you guys know, we have EPL, FPL, ESEA, ESL, so many tournaments across the board right now that really don't offer qualifying events to those Korean teams, Asian teams, Chinese teams, whatever they may be. They're really not getting offered our already, as of right now, chances to qualify for these tournaments. And especially when, I hate to say it, when you have teams as of this last weekend in Starladder Invitational Season 2 who finally get there. We had MVP Project, who really was a disappointment there. They lost devastatingly. They didn't even win a game there. They went 0-2. It's very hard to argue for those teams when they have only one team show up after qualifying and they do terribly. So it really hurts. It hurts really badly, especially when you have the WESA and the PEA. They're already being exclusive to those European and North American teams. And again, what's motivating them to actually branch out towards other teams? So my only worry in the future, guys, is where CSGO is going these next few years. Are they going to split off to where we only have one major a year, where finally the North American teams and European teams come together and clash? Where do the Asian teams, where do the Korean teams, where do all those other world teams actually fall into play when they don't have a league of their own? I don't know. So that's what I'm going to say right now, guys, for the PEA. I'm kind of controversial on it right now. It seems like a great thing, just like WESA did, but WESA's kind of gone quiet as well, so we'll have to wait and see what happens in the future. And that's going to do it for today's episode of CSGO News, guys. I'm sorry for rambling about PEA. Obviously, I'm not one of the more official people to talk about that. I've only read through the article, the same article you guys can read as well. Those are my opinions, though. Those are my statements. In my own opinion, that's what I think about it. I think it's going towards a weird direction for CSGO. It's going to be really curious to see where CSGO goes in the next few years. We had a lot of other esports growing behind CSGO. CSGO kind of in a plateau right now. Not really sure where we're going to go growth-wise. So, as always, hope you guys all enjoy this episode of CSGO News. I hope to see you guys sometime soon in the future with another episode of CSGO News. I also had an episode today uploaded on my esports news channel. I've been loving that channel so far, slowly learning about more esports like Call of Duty, League of Legends, Overwatch especially, something I'm very interested in learning more about. Hope you all enjoy. As always, my name is Jake. Remember, I like you. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.